Sione Paea was messianic. He was a messianic figure in the cubicle right next to my cubicle. I had a messianic guy sit right next to me, and I never knew it. I am honest on this one. I never knew that Sione was in fact messianic. Sione was as messianic as blueberry pie. He was a nice guy, Sione. He was fast and brainy, Sione. Yes, I'd say Sione was in fact brainy. That's not an overstatement regarding Sione. He was a nice, fluffy and cuddly character, Sione. Yet, he wasn't all over the place. He had his shit together real well. And I did like that fact. I respected that. Sione Paea had my respect. The fact that Sione had his shit well organized to such an extent made me tremble, stutter, and altogether owe in a state of deep admiration. Sione would embody goodness. Sione was benevolent, humane, decent, generous. Sione was kind. Sione was mild. But above and beyond all of these ephemeral qualities, Sione was, in fact, messianic. What made Sione messianic was the fact that I was always happy to see him. Sione would bring a fresh vibe all around our cubicles. Sione was a wise man, a wise guy. One could never assimilate Sione. Yes, Sione was impossible to assimilate. No matter how hard people tried, and people did try extremely hard, Sione was not to be assimilated. Sione refused any debate on this topic. Sione refused categorically the idea of debating this matter. To Sione Paea, the topic of assimilation was something like bagpipes played on a jazz tune. That is not an exaggeration, those are exactly his words. Words of his, exactly as spoken. While assimilation itself would have been through a weakening deduction, something like a mistake in categories. One did not talk to Sione, not about this topic. Talking about this to Sione was precisely like playing Mama Leone. It just did not make sense. At any level of abstraction, he simply did not budge. Not on this one. Yet, one could not avoid wondering about these things. That was precisely the charm of the situation. The fact that one could somehow distract Sione from his usual and entertain some form of hint, perhaps some form of joke, or other types of phrasing that we are able to call imagination. But this type of reasoning was far-fetched, to say the least. Yes, jokes were allowed, but the fact of the matter was, there had to exist meaning. Jokes could not have been said without something, some form of deep interpretation. Some evidence that something serious was to be implied. Otherwise, one would not joke. Things were as simple as that. I did not think much of Sione when seeing his name written down at the entrance of the lab. Yet, I understood. Things became plain from the start, from our very first encounters. Reflecting yourself around Sione Something like a Rubik's Cube type of reflection, an algebraic, if you prefer. Reflecting around Sione was similar to its Japanese name, kintsugi. If and when reflecting around Sione, one would indeed become kintsugi. Yes, Sione had discipline. He was a disciplined kind of guy. Sione had discipline. He was methodical to the dot. Sione placed the focal stress on two things: discipline and method. An emphasis which in itself did play a crucial role in our laboratory, on our work environment. Professional. Sione was a true professional. Sione had a can-do attitude. If there existed a problem, Sione would solve it. I had absolutely no doubt that he would solve the problem. And as time went by, my confidence in Sione also grew stronger and stronger. He was the kind of man that did, in fact, get better with age. A lot like Sean Connery, for example. I remember Sione at the graduation ceremony that remained imprinted deep in our memories and on the memories of most people attending that ceremony, I would assume. He was simply the star of the show. Sione was awesome. Sione was always awesome. The way he'd impose discipline was of a somewhat subtle nature. He'd often be heard saying, one of his rather ideological constructs, he'd be saying that in life one would either win or lose. And the implications were clear. In order to win in life, one had to be a winner. That's all. Very neat, very simple. It is interesting how Sione would involve himself carelessly, perhaps in games of a semantic nature. Yet he disliked semantics. He had something like an organic, so to speak, aversion towards semantics. Things had to be done. Things had to be achieved. And Sione did that by the book. In other words, by placing focal stress on the attitude of discipline. Sione followed the rules to the dot. That is, perhaps, what Sione was all about. Following the rules. Sione was highly efficient. I can tell you that much about Sione. One has seldom seen an efficiency on anyone else as observed on Sione. I have personally compared Sione with Sean Connery, yet people would compare Sione Paea with Mel Gibson. Mel Gibson. And he disliked that. I disliked that particular comparison, and Sione Paea disliked that comparison too. The comparison in question did not have a pretense of depth. That was the problem when comparing someone like Sione Paea with Mel Gibson. The comparison was superficial in my opinion. What people meant in fact was that Sione was lethal. It was a simple play on words, just a word play, that's all. People are a lot like that. When a person like Sione Paea becomes a common attitude, the conceptual web associated with the person in question converges towards an average. It is what I conjecture in any case. It is what I think about Sione and people in general. No, Sione was in fact a people person. I think nobody would dispute that if they were to be fair. However, his level of efficiency was unbelievable. Meaning one could not believe their eyes. The level of skill he always put into his work, the way he prepared a problem at hand, the way he researched a problem at hand, and the way he delivered a problem at hand. Highly skilled, highly efficient. He was a lethal weapon. Sione Paea was a lethal weapon.
Sione did ponder about things. He thought. He did not struggle thinking, but he did think about stuff, I have no doubt about it. The question of whether people were in fact genetically predetermined was something he struggled with most of his life. That was the question for Sione, for an applied mathematician. Sione Paea approached this problem confident. He read a lot. Sione did read a lot. Everybody could judge that Sione was a well-read scientist and humanist from his vocabulary mostly. He had an exquisite type of vocabulary. I think about his vocabulary, his phraseology, the length of ideas he expressed. Sione was an intellectual, no doubt about that. Everything about his manner of doing things transpired intellectually. Yet Sione Paea was not the type of person to take things for granted. Sione never did that. That's not essentially what Sione had in mind when making use of artifices of an intellectual sort. Sione was a modest guy, a modest person. He did not want to stand out. That is not what Sione Paea wanted. He did not want to stand out at all. It is hard to say what Sione wanted in case he did want something. I believe representing his community, and by that I mean loosely speaking the sort of people he engaged with on a day-to-day basis. That was an important aspect about Sione Paea. I think for Sione Paea, being somebody mattered. Being somebody important, that is. That did matter to him, no doubt about it. It did matter to be respected all over the place, yet he did not make of this an ideal. Sione enjoyed the glory, but he was at the same time well aware of its quintessentially fleeting character. Things were very simple for Sione. To have respect was to show it, and to show it meant to have it. Being Sione Paea was hard, but somebody had to do it.
Sione was not the type of person for which there'd be something to hide. Saying that to Sione was received as an insult. Saying something of that nature was to be avoided. On the other hand, implying in a direct manner that Sione was shady, was to be received coldly. You'd get nowhere, and I mean nowhere. That kind of perception was not to be fostered. We have to remember this. We have to remember that Sione was a direct person. Sione did not hide. No. These sort of games were far from what Sione stood for. Being opaque. There was not even something he understood. Opacity was never something he strived for. His approach was always frontal. His attitude was always transparent to the extreme. He used to tease me all the time about the level of opacity I manifested. He used to call me inhibited. Sione always said I was an inhibited type. He was in fact mild in this type of reproach. Sione was mild and benevolent. One cannot say that Sione was ever impolite. No, not at all. Sione was not some sort of piedone. So asking Sione for a favor was always received well. Yet one would have to be cautious. One would generally show cautiousness in asking and receiving favors. In this lies the truth.
People are highly cautious when asking or receiving favors. Yet, Sione would always do favors. Always. That's what Sione did. That's what Sione was. That's what he stood for. That's what being Sione, Paea meant. The action of favoring. The activity of doing favors. I'm talking essences here. I'm being an essentialist. And that is everything. Almost everything. To show cautiousness in asking favors from Sione would mean to break the rules of the game. Not in my case, don't get me wrong. Do not misunderstand what I'm saying here. Sione was benevolent in what concerned my person. Sione would try to educate me on things. And that in itself was a favor, that is all. Sione was, in fact, awesome. Yet, I have to think about myself too. Showing up everywhere with Sione meant I'd lose the focal attention of people. Showing up with Sione meant I was not to be the most important person on stage. Showing up with the guy that did everyone favors meant I lost. The game was lost. From the start, the game was lost before even playing it. Yet people looked at you when accompanied by Sione Paea. You were in fact noticed. Being noticed was what it meant to be around Sione. That's what it was all about. You see where this is going. You notice the implication, an easy step in logic. You think people would use Sione Paea. You think people would make use of Sione in a bad way. You'd think Sione would be used by people for their own advantage. That is far from being correct. Sione was somehow bulletproof. Sione had his shit together real well. Sione was to be reckoned with. Yes, being around Sione Paea, one had to be just that. Company, background. So we finally get into proper considerations here. The proper consideration. The abstract idea of monetization. That's what it's all about, abstractly. I'm talking abstract shit here. We're not talking monetization as in, you know, cashing in, making dough. That's not what things are all about. Dough is an illusion. I'm more than honest on this one. Things aren't about dough at all. They were never about dough. To think about dough and idealize dough, it's wrong. To think about dough as a final purpose in life would mean to be a pigeon. That's what I learned from Sione. That's what Sione taught me. Sione was a good man, I mean this. People would go a step further and challenge anyone. People would challenge anyone to find a crack in Sione's system. I'm not reluctant in saying this. I am far from proposing resentment here. As things stand right now, the issue at hand is not about resentment. Resentment cannot be a constructive attitude. Things cannot be about resentment. I'm not saying things should not, I'm saying things can not. They cannot be about resentment. This is not a philosophy of resentment. I think Sione would agree with this. Sione would in fact back me 100% on this. That is, in my opinion, what Sione would
do. Sione would back me on this one. Things cannot be about a philosophy of resentment. And Sione would, in fact, agree. I know that much about Sione. That much about Sione is, in fact, common sense. Yet things were not about mannerism either, about showing manners. What does that mean anyway? What does being mannered mean? What is it really? No, I really mean this. Does showing manners make life easier to anyone? Yes, one could in fact argue that this is what manners are all about. Making life easier for everyone. Yet Sione was highly exigent on these things, on these aspects. Sione went for the essence. Sione wanted more. Sione wanted everything. Sione was striving towards an absolute. Sione was a man of genius. When thinking about Sione, one should not think about mannerism. It is not about mannerism. Manners are not in question. There never existed any hint that manners were in dispute. No hint whatsoever that Sione would dispute manners. Sione did not do that. When thinking about Sione, people should in fact think about protocol. That is what Sione was all about. Protocol. Sione was about protocol. That is the paradigm. The paradigm is protocol. That is what Sione Paea was. That is what being Sione Paea meant. Following a protocol. I am amazed to this day about the depth of this philosophy, about the intrinsic character of this system of thought. Sione did make a difference. To me at least, Sione made the difference. Sione was like the straw that broke the camel's back. I know, finding precision in expression as desirable as this can be isn't always possible. Yet, that is what Sione represented. I remember those times clearly. They were good times for all of us in the lab. Sione was in great shape. I was in great shape. Henry was in awesome shape. Those were great times for Henry MacDonald. We all appreciated Sione. Sione was something like a hero for all of us. So we had an idea. How about we make Sione a gift? I was very tight with money at the time, but Henry was still living with his parents. So he did agree to finance this very small project. It was my idea, to be entirely precise. How about we buy Sione a furashka? I said that to Henry. Buy what? Henry was a curious nature. Henry did not know what a furashka was. That was surprising to me. Henry was the smartest guy in the lab. The smartest guy in our lab did not know what a furashka was. So I explained this to Henry. It was hard, to say the least. It was very hard to explain to Henry MacDonald what a furashka was. It took about 1,500 pages to explain this properly. Finally, Henry MacDonald understood. He finally understood what a furashka was, because I explained it to him. Henry said such a thing was ugly. Henry MacDonald refused to pay. Henry did not pay for Sione's furashka. Henry was not born yesterday. Not many people indulge in my way of thinking about things. Not many people do follow what I have to say. If you have to be mean to me, you'll probably say something along the lines of, this is Ricky Gervais shit. You just think you have originality. You've seen some Ricky Gervais on television and you think you are able to deconstruct shit. Is that what it is? You think you are Ricky? You want to be Ricky Gervais? Or perhaps that is whom you want to become. You want to be someone like Ricky Gervais. So you want to be Ricky Gervais. You want to end up like Ricky Gervais. Is that what it is? Be careful what you wish for us. Because if you want to become Ricky Gervais, you are going to end up like Ricky Gervais. Whenever I'm being told stuff like this, I end up a little puzzled. What's that got to do with anything? Is that what your daddy told you? Was that his parenting style? Are you by any chance blaming your parents for their parenting style? Well, okay. How about you do a better job than what your parents did? In case your parents did such a huge mistake, as if to never forgive them. No, I don't believe this shit. This shit is stupid. It is a pretext. This Freudian type of shit is preposterous by far. Stupid. Thank you very much for the discourse. I'd rather continue reminiscing on Sione, because Sione was a good man. Sione was a wise man, a wise guy.